Kausalya clung to the body of the dead king, weeping without end. "I shall go with my lord to Yama's abode," she cried. "How can I live, bereft of my son and my husband both?" The elders and palace officers gently drew her away from the lifeless king and led her, broken, from the chamber. The elders then took counsel about the funeral rites, but these couldn't be performed at once. Rama and Lakshman were far away in the forest, and Bharat and Shatrughan were in distant Kekaya at their uncle's house. So they resolved to summon Bharat, and until his coming, to keep the king's body preserved in oil. So the great monarch's remains lay waiting for Bharat's return, and Ayodhya, the city of splendor, was sunk in darkness and lamentation. Crowds of women gathered in the streets and reviled Kaikeyi's name, while a deep unease filled the hearts of men, for the throne stood empty, and no one could imagine a land without a king. When the long, grief-stricken night had passed, the ministers, officers, and learned elders assembled in the great hall at dawn. Markandeya, Vamdev, Kashyapa, and other venerable sages, with Sumantra and the ministers, bowed low before the family guru Vasishtha and spoke of the peril facing the leaderless kingdom. "The night we have just passed was like 100 years, sir," they said. "The king is no more. Rama and Lakshman are in the forest, and Bharat and Shatrughna far off in Kekaya. Someone must shoulder the burden of rule at once, for a land without a king cannot stand. Where there is no ruler, all order crumbles into ruin. Without a king, order vanishes," they warned. "Sons cease to obey their fathers and wives their husbands. The rains hold back, thieves and robbers range at will, and no man trusts another. Neither farming nor trade can flourish, and the very springs of charity run dry. A great darkness falls upon the land. Temples fall silent. The Shastras go unexpounded, and men dare no longer sleep with their doors unbarred." They went on. "Culture withers, and at the last men prey on one another, like fish in a shrinking pool. If good is to thrive and evil to be held in check, a king there must be. Dharma itself is now in peril. Let us make haste to find a ruler." Vasishtha summoned trusted messengers and instructed them carefully. "Ride at once, straight and swift, to Kekaya. Let no sign of sorrow show on your faces or in your bearing. Bharat must not learn that the king is dead. Tell him only that the family preceptor and the ministers require his presence in Ayodhya without delay. Say nothing of Rama and Sita going to the forest, nor of the king's death by grief." Vasishtha warned, "To avoid all suspicion, carry the customary gifts of jewels and precious garments for the king of Kekaya. For truth, rightly kept, must never needlessly wound, and gentle concealment in such an hour is the kinder wisdom." Soon the messengers were provisioned and made ready for the long road. On swift, hardy horses they raced past rivers and forests, over hill and through valley, until at last they came to Kekaya, far in the west, and its capital Rajagriha, where the Ikshvaku princes were staying in the palace of their mother's father. That very night, in Kekaya, Bharat was troubled by evil dreams and woke in the morning filled with foreboding. His face plainly showed his distress. His companions tried to lift his spirits with dance and mirth, but nothing could dispel the shadow that had fallen over his heart. Perhaps the death anguish of Dasaratha had reached his son across the miles, through the mysterious telepathy of love. "It seems to me," Bharat thought, "that death is approaching Rama, or Lakshman, or myself. They say an early morning dream does not fail to come true, and mine was terrible. I am full of fear, and know not what to do. Just then the messengers from Ayodhya were announced. The king of Kekaya and his son Yudhajit received them with all courtesy. Having paid their respects to the king and the princess, the messengers turned to Bharat and delivered the message they had been charged with, keeping every trace of their grief hidden. "The priests and ministers send you their blessings," they said, "and beg you to return at once to Ayodhya. For your presence, there is most urgently needed. Pray accept these garments and jewels, gifts from the palace for your uncle and grandfather." So they summoned the prince home, revealing nothing of the sorrow that awaited him. Bharat asked them how all fared at home. His uneasy heart set him wondering whether his mother's headstrong, grasping temper might lie behind this sudden summons. "And my mother, the proud queen Kaikeyi, who thinks herself so wise and must always have her way. Is she in good health?" he asked. The messengers, hard put to it, answered as best they could. "O tiger among men, all are well, whose welfare is dear to you. Lakshmi, goddess of sovereignty, throned upon the lotus, now courts you. Mount your chariot and lose no time." Behind their riddling words lay the unspoken thought that Bharat was to be crowned. Bharat took his leave of his uncle and his grandfather, and all was made ready for his going. The old king and Yudhajit gathered the rare and precious things of their land as gifts for Dasaratha and for Prince Rama. Then Bharat and Shatrugna climbed into their chariots and set out for Ayodhya with a great retinue. They traveled fast, unmindful of fatigue, pressing on by forced marches, and on the morning of the 8th day drew near to Ayodhya. But as the city came into view, Bharat's mind filled with misgiving. Nothing seemed as it had been before, and the very air felt heavy with disaster. "Why does the city wear such a strange look?" Bharat asked his charioteer. "I do not see the usual crowd strolling in the gardens outside the walls. Where are the young men and women with their bright, cheerful faces? Everyone seems sunk in sorrow." A cold dread crept over him as they drew nearer. His chariot passed in through the victory gate. The streets and houses and temples stood bare and undecked. The faces of the people looked pinched and famished. "Why are the instruments silent?" Bharat asked. "Why are the citizens not adorned with flowers and sandal paste? These are all evil signs. I cannot still my dread." Ill omens met his eyes at every turn. Bharat felt sure now that some great misfortune had struck the city, and that this was why he had been so hastily summoned. He entered his father's palace. But the king was nowhere to be seen. His anxiety mounted higher, and a terrible foreboding tightened in his chest. Then he went to his mother Kaikeyi's palace. Seeing her son after his long absence, she sprang up from her golden couch to embrace him. Bharat bent and touched her feet, and she kissed his head and welcomed him with a mother's blessing, all unaware of the storm her news would soon unleash. "Did your journey go well?" Kaikeyi asked. "Are your uncle and grandfather in health? Tell me all about them." Bharat answered that the journey had taken 7 days, and that all at Kekaya were well and sent their love and their gifts. "But the envoys hurried me," he said, "saying that pressing business needed me here." "What is it all about?" "I went to the king's palace to make my reverence," Bharat said. "But he was not there, and his couch here too stands empty. Perhaps he is with one of my elder mothers. I must go and find him." Knowing nothing of what had happened, he waited for his mother's answer, unaware that his whole world was about to break apart. Then the queen, drunk with her new sense of power, answered lightly, My child, your father had his full portion of life's blessings. Great was his fame. He performed every sacrifice the tradition enjoins and was a refuge to the good. He has now passed into the higher world and joined the gods. So carelessly did she break the dreadful news. At the words, Bharat dropped to the ground with a cry. His long arms flung out upon the floor. Rising, he looked on his father's empty bed and sobbed like a destitute orphan. The mighty, godlike prince cast himself down upon the earth and wept like a helpless child, his grief wild and past all controlling. Looking down at her son, fallen like a great tree cut through by the axe, Kaikeyi said, "Rise up, O king, stand. It ill becomes a king to mourn and grovel on the ground. Honor and glory wait for you to take them up. You must uphold dharma and perform the sacrifices of your royal forefathers. Rise, strong of limb and stout of heart." But Bharat's mind was immaculate and spotless, and he did not perceive the ambition hidden in his mother's appeal. After lamenting long, he rose at last and spoke through his tears. "I had hoped to return and see Rama's installation and the great festive ceremonies over. How differently has everything turned out. Never again shall I look upon my father's face." Bharat wept. What did he die of? What sickness carried him off? And I was not beside him as he lay dying. It fell to Rama to tend him in his last hours. How dearly the king loved me. If but a mote of dust settled on me, he would brush it away with his own soft hand. "But mother, where is Rama?" Bharat asked. "From now on, he is father and teacher both to me. I must see him at once and kiss his feet, for he is my one refuge now." "And what was my father's last message to me? Tell me his very words. I ache to hear them." So he turned to her, still trusting, still innocent of the truth. Kaikeyi, torn between her breeding and her ambition, framed her words to serve both the truth and her design. "Your father died with a cry upon his lips. 'Ha Rama, ha Lakshman, ha Janki,' she said. He passed away lamenting that it was not given him to live and see Rama and Lakshman and Sita return, and calling happy those who should behold their homecoming." From this, Bharat gathered that Rama and Lakshman too had been away from the king's side. His grief sharpened into confusion, and he pressed his mother. Where were they? What business drew them away from our father in his final hours? His heart, already broken, now filled with a terrible bewilderment. Hoping to calm him, Kaikeyi said, "My son." Rama put on the robes of an ascetic and, taking Lakshman and Sita with him, went off to the Dandaka forest. At this, Bharat's amazement passed all bounds, and he stared at his mother as though he could make no sense of the words she spoke. "I understand nothing of what you tell me," Bharat cried. "What sin did Rama commit that he should take up such a penance? Did he rob a Brahman, or injure some innocent soul, or turn eyes of desire on another man's wife? Why should he go to the forest? Who laid this dreadful penance on him?" The questions came pouring out in a storm. Shaken from her silence by this tempest of questions, Kaikeyi came out at last with the whole truth, foolishly trusting it would end well. Rama did no wrong, she admitted. He robbed and injured no one, and it was never in his nature to look with desire on another's wife. The fault, if fault there is, was mine. When I saw that all was being made ready to install Rama as crown prince, Kaikeyi said, "I went to the king, for your sake, and claimed the 2 boons he had granted me long ago. I asked that the kingdom pass to you, and that Rama be exiled to the forest. Bound by his old promise, your father consented. So Rama went to the forest with Sita and Lakshman. She continued, and unable to bear the separation, your father died of grief. But do not waste yourself in useless lamentation now. Think rather of your duty. You know dharma, and your duty is to accept the burden of kingship, which has come to you unsought. All this I did for your sake, Kaikeyi declared, and you should take the fruit of my deed in the spirit in which I did it. City and kingdom have fallen into your hands without your wishing or working for them. Perform your father's obsequies as Vasishtha directs, and then make yourself ready for the coronation. You are a Kshatriya, she said. You have inherited your father's kingdom. Attend now to the duty that has fallen to you. But as she spoke, she could not see the horror rising in her son's noble heart. She had expected joy and gratitude, and instead, she had kindled in Bharat a loathing beyond all her imagining. Bharat stood as if turned to stone. The father he loved was dead. The brother he revered was banished. The throne he never sought was thrust upon him. And all of it, he now knew, was the work of his own mother's cruel ambition. The weight of that knowledge crashed upon him like a mountain falling. For Bharat loved Rama above his own life, and he had never once coveted the crown. That his mother should have committed so monstrous a sin in his name filled him not with gratitude, but with shame and anguish. She had made him, all unwilling, the cause of his father's death and his brother's exile. The city that should have welcomed a coronation lay in mourning. The queen who thought she had won, all had won only her son's revulsion. And Bharat, the noblest of brothers, stood upon the threshold of a grief and a fury that would soon burst forth against the mother who had wrought such ruin. How strange are the ways of fate, that a mother's love, twisted into ambition, should destroy the very son it sought to raise. Kaikeyi had gained a throne for Bharat and lost his heart forever. In seeking to make him king, she had made herself, in his eyes, the author of every sorrow that had befallen their house. So Bharat arrived at last in Ayodhya, not to a joyous crowning, but to a dead father, an exiled brother, and a mother he could scarcely bear to look upon. The stage was set for his great outpouring of grief and wrath, and for the noble devotion by which he would seek, in the days to come, to undo his mother's terrible sin.